therapists still go to therapy. Doctors still see a doctor. Like professionals still have to get professional help. So it doesn't make you an imposter. It makes you experienced.
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award-winning journalist, a mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more podcasts at mailtribune.com. And don't forget to check out my Hip Habits workbook. It is Happiness in Progress Habits, 6 months of weekly habits to support a happier you and a happier life. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest. Today, you are going to be hearing from Taylor Arco. She is a certified life coach and future marriage and family therapist who specializes in mindset coaching. She has helped dozens of women stop their negative self-talk, create lasting healthy habits, and find success in their careers. Today, we talk about how to have a holistic view of your own wellness. We talk about how important your thoughts are and what you can do to cultivate a mindset that helps you accomplish the things you want to accomplish in your life. We also talk about the power of journaling and how it benefits you and creates a happier and more grateful life. We talk about all of that and a lot more, so let's get to it. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, of course. I'm super happy to be here.
One of the ways that you describe the work that you do is you say that you use a positive psychology model. Can you tell me what that is?
Yeah, so positive psychology is just one of the subsections of psychology, but it really focuses on a person's strengths, the community support that they have around them, and using that to boost them. So rather than just looking at their own mental state, we look at the things that they bring to the table, and as well as their community, their support system, and everything that's going to help them get from point A to point B.
And it seems like to me, in the work that you do, you have an approach, a holistic approach, where you're focusing on more than just one part of somebody's life. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm in school to become a marriage and family therapist. And the reason that marriage and family therapists differ from other therapists or other psychologists is because we look at it through a holistic lens almost. So we don't just focus on this person and what is making them depressed or why they're depressed, but we look at this person and then we look at their relationships and everything in their environment. And we know that all those factors come into play. So we're trained to recognize those a little bit more than other types of therapists or psychologists.
Right. I think so often that is something that goes forgotten because it's easy to focus on these are my problems, these are the to-dos, this is my solution, and less of this is my family situation, these are my relationships. So my question is, how can we become aware of that for ourselves to start helping ourselves in knowing how these different aspects of life are impacting us?
You know, whether someone sets monthly goals or yearly goals or is just journaling, to journal about all the different aspects of our lives. It's really easy to say, I want to make this much money or I want to run a marathon. But like, what about what do you want your family relationships to look like? What do you want your romantic relationships to look like? Your friendships? What do you want your home environment to feel like? What are your goals with that? What are your goals with your physical health, your mental health? Like assessing all those different areas of our lives. I think we get caught up in certain areas and we forget to think about all the other ones.
In your work with people, is there a space that you've noticed people most often forget?
I can't say that there's one consistent one, but I think that it's very easy to just forget a space. So we get really comfortable in our romantic relationship, right? And we forget to start putting that effort in or doing the small things. So we say like everything's good and we don't set goals for that relationship and we don't really focus on it on a day-to-day basis. And then we wake up one day and it's not what it used to be. And we're kind of like, oh, what happened? So I think just really maintaining that consistency so that that doesn't happen. And that's why it's really important to just assess all the areas. I do it on a monthly basis. I set monthly goals for my relationships, my friendships, my career, school, health, fitness, like any area, my home environment. Do I need to declutter, like all of that, because that all comes into play, and there's not one big thing that makes an effect. It's all these little areas. If they're all at 75%, then you're at 75%.
Mm-hmm. I love that example you gave of the relationship, because I am sure so many people have been there, whether it is with a relationship or something else, with their fitness or their house or whatever it is. What does your monthly assessment look like? How can someone, what are they writing down? What is the tangible part of that monthly assessment?
Yeah, so mine looks like I write down every area of my life that I can think of. Spiritual, family, romantic, friendships, career, school. I also include not just like health and fitness and diet, but I include like hobbies, things that aren't going to make me money, things that don't boast any benefits other than like I really enjoy them. And with that, it might look like, okay, this month I want to do one puzzle, and I want to run this many miles, and I want to do a date box with my fiance. And they're all really small things. They're not these big goals, but they're just things that make sure that at least once a week I'm doing something to achieve that monthly goal. And I'm constantly like putting a little bit of effort and paying attention to all those areas of my life.
Mm-hmm. I love how simple those goals are and how much they support just general joy and like satisfaction in general living. I think we get caught up in goals needing to be a really huge thing. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, so little goals are important because big goals take a long time. And if you're only going for that big goal and it takes months to get to, if it takes 6 months to get to, at month two, you're defeated. You don't feel good because you don't know if you're making any progress.
Mm.
And so these little goals are nice because you can say, like, yep, I checked. I mean, think about when you have a to-do list and you get to check off like the most simple thing, it still feels really good. And that's what these little goals are for. They hold you accountable throughout the process so that you don't procrastinate anything. But they also give you that feeling of like achievement. You did something and it keeps you going.
Yes, I love it. It reminds me of the snowball effect from Dave Ramsey. It's those little wins of paying off the the smallest debts, but it's similar in having the little wins. I love that. How big of a role do our thoughts play in us being able to achieve these small and large goals?
Our thoughts play the biggest role of anything in our lives, really. I mean, I think we have between like up to 90,000 thoughts a day. And I want to say it was like 80%. I read one study. I think it said 80% of our thoughts are repetitive. So they're not original thoughts. They're ones that we're constantly thinking about. So if 80% of your thoughts are something that you're just repeating in your head, you want to make sure that those are helpful thoughts.
How can someone do that?
There's a few ways. The biggest would be affirmations and gratitude. Those play a role because there's this thing called neuroplasticity. And it's a big fancy word, but it really just means the brain's ability to rewire itself. So we get caught in habits. We're creatures of habit. So we get caught in thought patterns as well of this is how we think. Maybe it's on the more negative aspect, maybe it's on the more positive side, whatever it might be. But we get caught in these roles. So doing affirmations or gratitude retrains your brain to look at things and think a different way. So if you're constantly doing gratitude, I do 3 gratitude every morning. It takes like 30 seconds. But what it does is for the rest of the day, my brain has been set that we're going to look for things to be grateful for because tomorrow I have to do this again. So your brain starts looking at things differently, and it literally rewires your brain to make sure that those repetitive thoughts that you do have are helpful.
It's amazing because it is so simple, and it's amazing that something so simple can actually rewire the brain, right?
It sounds like a really difficult task to rewire the brain, to change our lives, whatever. But like we talked about earlier, it's just all of those little things that add up. It's not one big thing that takes hours and hours.
I love that. What do you see is one of the or some of the biggest hurdles for people when it comes to their mindset?
I think a lot of times people struggle with imposter syndrome. Um, it's, I feel like, very prevalent. Imposter syndrome is this feeling of like you're not good enough, you're not qualified, and that you're going to be, quote, found out. But it's not true because you know that you're qualified logically, but the emotional side of your brain feels like you're a fraud. And I think that's the biggest thing that people struggle with, especially in the professional side of things when they're trying to help others. I think they feel like, oh, I'm not qualified to help this person. I think a big part of feeling unqualified is feeling like, well, I still struggle with some of these things. Um, how can I help someone reach their fitness goals when I gained 10 pounds this year? But that's not all it is. It's also your knowledge, it's your ability to help others. There's a lot of factors that play into maybe gaining those 10 pounds, but therapists still go to therapy, doctors still see a doctor. Like, professionals still have to get professional help. So it doesn't make you an imposter, it makes you experienced.
Oh my goodness. I love that. Therapists still go to therapy. Doctors still need to see a doctor. So, so good. So, if someone's dealing with this imposter syndrome, other than, okay, having that, acknowledging it and saying, okay, it's okay for me to be not a perfect human being because those don't exist. Are there any other tangible things they can do?
I think really talking to someone about it. Brene Brown makes a great point that shame grows in darkness. So talking about that really brings that shame to light. And part of like that imposter syndrome is like the fear of what other people will say or think, or that you'll be found out. But if you speak about it and you get to see the positive response that people are going to have, then it really helps that shame subside, because you're like, oh, okay. Like, these people want to work with someone who's been through it. And then, so I think talking about it is really the biggest thing, is just acknowledging it, voicing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the shame continues to tell us the same story. You're an imposter. And once we say it to other people, they're like, oh, yeah, no, but of course you're that way because we're humans and we're all in it together. I love that. So you just released your 30 days of journal prompts. So I want to talk a little bit about journaling. Tell me about the role journaling plays in our well-being.
Journaling is the easiest thing you can do, and it boasts some of the biggest benefits. It makes you happier and it makes you more grateful. And when you're happier and more grateful, you're more productive, you're more creative, you're more likely to get a promotion, you live longer, you have less pain. One study showed that people with chronic illness actually could go down on their pain meds after journaling daily. Um, so all of those things, it's like, how could you not want to journal for just 5 minutes a day? And so I started journaling a lot more when I read about that. And I was talking to people about journaling, and some people just don't know where to start. It's a hard thing. What do you talk about? Do you say, like, dear diary, today? Or do you try and dive deep? What does that look like? And so I started writing journal prompts for people, and they were really helping. A lot of people were saying, this is what I needed to get started because I just didn't know what to write about. And so I came out with 30 days worth of journal prompts that can be repeated. So hopefully they last forever.
Yeah, I love the idea of it. I love journaling. I have a big stack from my whole life. I probably need to go through and redact them at some point. But you talked about how journaling helps us be more grateful. Do we have to be specifically and happier? Do we have to be specifically writing about things we're grateful for and things that make us happy to have that effect?
Not specifically things that we're grateful for or things that make us happy. But I think when people journal, they get caught up in like, oh, so and so said this and this happened today. And it becomes like this vent session, which I'm all for. I'm all for venting, getting it off our chest, and that's fine if that's what you need to journal about. But these benefits come from journaling about a positive experience. So journal 3 pages worth of venting, but end your journal on I'm grateful for, or an affirmation, or today I went to my favorite coffee shop. As long as you just talk about a positive experience to make that journaling on the positive side.
Did you have an experience when you first started journaling where you'd read the research and then you started the practice that you were like, oh my goodness, this really works. This is real.
Yeah, I journal every day. And when I'm home, I go home to Southern California about once a month to visit family. When I'm home, my whole schedule is off and I don't journal. By the end of the trip, I'm very happy to be home, but I feel like something is off with me. And I really do think it's the journaling. I start my mornings like that, and it sets my whole tone for the day.
That's incredible. So for beginners, if there are people listening who are beginners, what would you say is a good place to start?
I think a good place to start is with journal prompts, just because you have an objective. This is what I answer, and you know how to answer a question. That's easy. I think that would be the best place to start. And then from there, you can start experimenting, coming up with your own journal prompts, maybe free writing, which is with no prompts, just kind of a stream of conscious. But as long as you're putting pen to paper, you're going to see some of those benefits. So just figure out what works best for you and play around with it. It's not one size fits all.
So when someone is writing, I'm going back to the positive experiences, writing down the positive experiences, how does that make the impact? Is it the specific experiences that just live on in a person's mind or life, or is it just creating a neural pathway of I think positively?
Yeah, so it is. It's creating a neural pathway of I think positively. A majority of our thoughts are on the negative side. And so it's consciously making an effort to think positively. Putting pen to paper, research shows that in your brain, it registers as something that's more important versus when you just think about it, which is why in school, they always say to like write your notes or study pen and paper, because your brain recognizes it more. So that's one of the reasons that journaling works. But also just like taking time to recognize, even if today was a really, really crappy day, what is one thing good that came out of it? What is one thing good that happened?
I think it's really easy when things are going good to do the things with a positive mindset. And journaling is good for you. So you're like, I know journaling is good for me. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to journal. How does journaling in the good times help in the hard times?
It's a reinforcement, right? So our brains are hardwired to remember certain things, big life events, which is why when you're 5 years old, like thinking back to when you're 5, you can't really remember anything. You maybe remember like one thing. And to your brain, that was a really big thing. So journaling on those good days is just as important as journaling on the bad days, because you're creating just more positive associations and you're creating more positive habits and positive thought patterns. And so you have a lot more to talk about on good days, but it's reinforcing those positive memories and encouraging your brain to continue thinking about those ones too. When you get in like an argument with a stranger at the store and you walk away and you're thinking about it for the next few hours and like, oh, I should have said this. That's your brain ruminating on that thought. But you don't do that when something positive happens. You're not like, wow, for the next 3 hours, I'm going to talk about how that person bought me my coffee. So it forces your brain to like continue thinking about it and setting that tone.
You're not laying in bed trying to fall asleep thinking about all the good things. You're thinking about the things that went wrong. Yes, I love that. I love that illustration. So I come from a long family of journalers. That's why, I was journaling when I was journaling before I could write. I was drawing pictures, so my mom would narrate. But I have a memory from when I was little. My great grandma passed, and everybody had been reading her journals. And their big complaint was these are too positive. She never talks about the bad stuff. And I've never really known how to feel about it because I feel like mine are pretty positive as well. I've got the rant pages in there too, though. What do you think about that? Does that even matter, really?
No, I don't think it matters. I mean, you boast those benefits from journaling about a positive experience. So whether it was a good day or a bad day, try and get something positive down on paper. But if your journals are all positive, that's not bad. I think I can't speak for everyone. I haven't read a research study about it or anything, but I noticed with myself, my journals started out where like it was really hard for me to journal about the positive things. I was like, I don't need to get this off my chest. Like, I don't feel this need to like vent about it. But as time went on, my journals become more positive. I don't just talk about, oh, I have to do this today and this I struggled with, and this is, I'm also like, oh, today I have to do this, and it's just such a gorgeous day outside, and like la di da. And so I think like for me on paper, I can literally see my brain being more accustomed to like wanting to write about positive things too.
I love that. Does journaling help connect yourself with you?
Yeah, I think so. Depending on what your prompts look like, or if you're free writing, you can really dive deep. Free writing is my favorite to dive deep because it's a stream of conscious. So you never pick the pen up off the paper. You never take a break. It's quite literally like just every thought you have in your head. And the reason that it works so well is because you can't filter yourself when you do that. I think we're really quick to be like, oh, I shouldn't say that, or I shouldn't think that. And that's not, I mean, it can be helpful, but in journaling, it's not, because when we let ourselves write those things down, then we can really get to like our deeper, darker thoughts, and we can learn ourselves better.
That's my favorite type of journaling. Just like, I mean, obviously I have a podcast. I like to talk. So writing out is similar effect. Can you share with us like one prompt to get started?
Yeah. Let me pull up one of mine from my prompts. Let's see. Today's the 3rd, so I will do one. Let's see. Let's do goals, yeah?
Yeah, I love that.
Okay. How do I feel when I achieve a goal? So I chose this question because we want to like remind ourselves of not just like the process of getting to goals, but like the feeling of like actually achieving it, reminding ourselves of like what that's going to feel like. That way on a hard day, we can think about that. What is one thing I can do today to achieve my goals? And who in my life can support me in achieving this goal? So I organized my journal prompts in a way that like it's not just diving deep, but there's also actionable steps throughout the prompts. So today is one of those action days, and you'll notice that the questions are a lot about like, what can I do and who can help me? Because I wanted these prompts to be something that you learn about yourself in the process, but you're also like taking steps and basically writing down sort of like a to-do list for the day too. So each day is a little bit different, but that's the prompts that I did today.
It supports the whole you, right? With what we started with. And the people you've worked with and having these journal prompts out for a week, maybe 2 weeks. It's been a little bit. What is some of the response you've seen so far from people who are putting this practice into action?
So I've been working with clients for about a year now, and I've started collecting testimonials slowly but surely. And I check in with my clients, but a testimonial is different. So they have time to sit down and write like a whole paragraph. And it makes me very happy to see these testimonials because that's my ultimate goal. I don't want people to have to like work with me for forever. I mean, that's not realistic. I want to give them a set of tools and say, okay, like you know how to do it on your own, and like you're good now. And I'm always there for check-ins if they need, but for the most part, they're really capable. And then as far as the journal prompts, they just started, but some of the feedback I've gotten is amazing. One person said that the 3 days of journal prompts that she's done have done more for her than years of therapy. And that just blew my mind. It just makes me happy that I could come up with the right questions that really made that kind of impact for people.
Yeah. I think that we have become so disconnected with ourselves that sitting down, answering questions, and thinking about these things, what makes me happy? How do I feel when I accomplish a goal? That we're finally connecting with ourselves. No wonder you heard that.
Yeah, it shocks me every time. I was obviously confident in these journal prompts, but you can only be hopeful. You have like no hard evidence. And so getting these testimonials back from people, like it literally brings me to tears every single day. And I'm doing the journal prompts myself, so I'm going through the process with everyone. It's just like a fun experience, and I feel like there's really a community around it.
I love it. And that's what I was going to ask you next. Doing the journal prompts yourself, the difference between writing them and now answering them, how's that making an impact for you personally?
I wrote out all these questions, so I thought I'm prepared. I know how to answer these. Like I already know what to expect. And I sat down yesterday and I wrote out my answers, and I was like, this is a lot harder than I anticipated. Like even in just a week, like some of my answers I feel like have changed. And that's why, I mean, it's good though, because that's how I designed it, is to be repeatable, because we're constantly changing. And so these answers hopefully won't be the same for someone in a month, but they're definitely challenging, and they're challenging me. So I'm happy, because that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like to ask all my guests this final question. What is your tip to finding more joy in the good, the bad, and the in between of life?
I make sure that I do something that isn't for school, and it isn't for work, and it isn't for money, but something that's just like for my soul. So for me, that's like playing board games and doing puzzles and journaling. And those things don't bring me any monetary gains, any social gains, nothing like that. But it keeps me going on the hard days. If I sit down and I start working on my puzzle, like that brings me joy.
Thank you so much, Taylor, for coming on the podcast today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
I hope you appreciated this conversation with Taylor. Of course, I'm putting all of her information in the show notes. You can find her journaling prompts. You can also find her resources on her website. It's all in show notes. And I want to thank you for being here on Happiness and Progress.